hope you are all well. This is the 5th session of the California Zoroastrian Center seminar, Liberating Zarathustra's Relevance. And the title of this session is The Freedom to Choose and the Inevitable Good End. You well may question, if we have the freedom to choose, how can the good end be certain, inevitable? Well, this paradox is one of Zarathustra's life-affirming, beautiful teachings that has long been forgotten under the influence of other religious paradigms. So let's liberate it. The freedom to choose is a hallmark of his teaching. He says, for example, him who left to our will to choose between the beneficial and the non-beneficial. Reflect with a clear mind, man by man for himself, upon the two choices of decision. So if people are free to choose what is wrong, doesn't that mean we can never be certain that good will prevail and evil will be defeated? Yet, Zarathustra says the exact opposite, that the good end, the true, correct, wholly good order of existence, truth for short, eventually and inevitably will prevail. He says, however, it has been fated. I'm just going to get rid of these there. It has been fated for this world that truth is to be saved for its good preference, that deceit is to be destroyed for its false profession. Profession is used here in the sense of what is professed, in other words, what is stated. As I discussed in the last session, this idea that the certain good end is so foundational that we find it even in later Avestan and Pahlavi texts as Frasho Kereti and Frashgard, respectively. So how are we to understand this paradox, the freedom to choose and the inevitable good end? Let us first recall Zarathustra's notions of good and evil. Throughout the Gathas, good and evil are described as the products of choices in thought, word, and action. Good is the product of choices that are in accord with an order of existence that is true, correct, factual truths, as well as the truths of mind, heart, spirit, or that is right, good, which in the Gathas includes such qualities as honesty, generosity, loving kindness, friendship, compassion, etc. In fact, Zarathustra calls this order of existence the superlative degree of intrinsic goodness, ashavahishta. And evil is the product of choices that are incorrect, or that is factually false, as well as what is wrong. In the Gathas, this includes such things as lies, deceit, anger, violence, murder, cruelty, bondage, tyranny, corruption, theft, ignorance, etc. Let us take it, now, if evil is the product of wrongful choices, then when we stop choosing evil, we deprive it of substance. It ceases to have reality in thoughts, words, and actions. Let us take it a step further. We become what we choose. So the more we choose truth, the more truth-filled we become, until eventually we personify truth completely, the wholly beneficial way of being. So wouldn't it be equally possible for a person to eventually become completely evil through his wrongful choices? The answer, as I see it in the Gathas, is that this is not possible. Let us consider Zarathustra's reasoning step by step. According to him, the good and evil ways of being are a part of our original nature. He says, yes, there are two fundamental ways of being, twins, which are renowned to be in conflict, in thought and in word. In action, they are two. The more good and the bad. So as long as evil remains a preference in anyone's way of being and finds expression in that person's thoughts, words, and actions, it cannot be defeated. Therefore, it is apparent that evil cannot be defeated by a divine decree that abolishes evil, because evil is a part of the nature of living beings. Nor can evil be defeated by punishment. The fear of punishment may cause a person to hide his evil inclinations, but once that fear is removed, the inclination would again express itself in thought, word, and action, and evil would still be with us. A way to defeat evil, therefore, would be to change the preference for evil in all the living. And this change, to be effective, real, would have to be something that is made from within, freely, without compulsion. And that is Zarathustra's solution for defeating evil. It is not punishment in a hell of tortures. It is changing minds, changing preferences. In his thought, this change is accomplished through certain factors, all of which are a part of the true, correct, good order of existence, Asha, and all of which occur concurrently. The first factor is the freedom to choose, to make our own choices, because that is how we learn. Even the failure to choose is a choice. The second factor is our many experiences. In Zarathustra's thought, the acquisition of wisdom is experience-based. These experiences include earned experiences.
Dina, we cannot hear you. We can't hear you.
You're muted now.
You're muted, Dina.
How about now?
Okay,
Good.
good. Thank you.
When did you stop hearing me?
Just a second ago, 10 seconds ago.
So I can continue, or do you want me to go back?
Go back a few
One
words.
sentence, please.
Beginning
Okay,
of the sentence.
I'll go to the, did you get the first factor is the freedom to choose?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
And did you get the second factor is our many experiences?
Okay, start from there.
Okay, the second factor is our many experiences. In Zarathustra's thought, the acquisition of wisdom is experience-based. These experiences include earned experiences in which we experience the consequences of our choices, unearned experiences, and mutual loving help. The earned experiences are what I call the law of consequences, that we reap what we sow, which in Zarathustra's thought is a part of the true. Can you hear?
Whoever is on mute, please mute yourself. I mute everybody, so I don't know who is it that talks. But go ahead.
Okay. Okay. The earned experiences are what I call the law of consequences, that we reap what we sow, which in Zarathustra's thought is a part of the true, correct, wholly good order of existence, Asha. In fact, when describing the agent that delivers the law of consequences, he frequently uses fire. Now, it is important to be aware that fire is never used in any Avestan or Pahlavi text that I am aware of as an agent of punishment. Even in the very un-Zarathustrian Pahlavi text we discussed in the last session that specializes in the punitive torments of hell, there is no mention of fire as an instrument of torment. In the Gathas and in later Avestan and Pahlavi texts, fire is a symbol or metaphor for three perspectives of one thing: truth, its comprehension, its personification, which is wisdom, an enlightened, light-filled state of being. But the mindsets of many translators and readers of the Gathas, conditioned by other religious paradigms, associate fire with the punitive fires of hell, which has distorted Zarathustra's teachings. Here are a few examples of how Zarathustra uses fire and the law of consequences. Addressing the divine, he says, "Now we wish thy fire, Lord, which possesses strength through truth, and which is the swiftest forceful thing, to be of clear help to thy supporter, but of visible harm, with the power in its hands to thy enemy." Here we know that fire is a metaphor, because physical fire is not made strong through truth, but understanding is made strong through truth. And throughout the Gathas, the enemy of wisdom is not another person or tribe. The enemy of wisdom is what is false, wrong, as Insler himself has pointed out. So in this verse, wisdom's enemy, all that is false, wrong, is harmed by the powerful light of truth and its comprehension, expressed through the metaphor fire. Another example, he says, "Those rewards thou shalt give through the heat of thy truth-strong fire to the deceitful and to the truthful." Here, fire cannot be a punitive agent because it delivers rewards not only to those who act deceitfully, but also to those who act truthfully. And here, the heat of wisdom's truth-strong fire reflects one of Zarathustra's metaphors for the soul refining process, which in 3 other verses he compares with metal ore being made molten, glowing through the heat of fire to eliminate the impurities in the ore and produce refined metal. Summarizing in a rather general, oversimplified way, for which I ask your forgiveness, how the law of consequences works to change our wrongful preferences. When the good we do comes back to us, we realize that this is the way we want things to be. It reinforces our good preferences. When the wrongs we do come back to us, we don't like being on the receiving end of such experiences. We realize that this is not the way we want things to be, that this is not the way things should be. These experiences inform our preferences. They enlarge our understanding, so that incrementally we come to want what is true, good, right, because that is the way we want things to be. This change does not occur overnight or with 1 or 2 experiences. It occurs over a very long period of time, through multiple experiences, as a later Avestan text implies, and I have footnoted quotations. And we should not beat ourselves up when we make mistakes, as we all inevitably will. Mistakes are a good way to learn. Now, you may object that being on the receiving end of evil does not necessarily change preferences. It often generates hatred, revenge, and a desire to identify with and imitate the abuser. That is true. Hold that thought for a moment. We will get to it. Unfortunately, many linguists have translated certain Avestan words in the Gathas as punishment, retribution, etc. These translation choices are inconsistent with what Zarathustra specifically says in the Gathas. But if we translate these Avestan words more literally as adverse consequences or similar English equivalents, without the added interpretation that these adverse consequences are given for punishment instead of for enlightenment, then these verses, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, fall into place. Here are a few examples of how the law of consequences is administered and what it brings about. Zarathustra says, may he dispense through his good thinking each reward corresponding to one's actions. When the distribution in the good shall occur to both factions through thy bright fire. That satisfaction which thou hast created for both factions, together with thy way of being, and hast promised through fire and truth. Together with this beneficial way of being, thou shalt give the distribution in the good to both factions through thy fire. In these verses, the law of consequences is implemented by wisdom through his good thinking, his beneficial way of being, and it delivers an end result that is good and brings satisfaction to both those who do good and those who do wrong. One satisfaction in the singular, one good end in the singular for both. And how does Zarathustra describe wisdom's fire here? As bright, a fire that brings illumination, not an instrument of punishment. There is one more Gatha verse on this subject that I would like to share with you. This time I will give you my more literal translation because, with respect, I find Insla's to be too interpretive. Zarathustra says, the satisfaction which you, wisdom, give for both types of conduct through your bright fire, through molten metal, is to be given for clarification among living beings, is to be given for untruthfulness to be destroyed. Thus you save truthfulness. To summarize, in the Gathas, the law of consequences is not a punitive process. It is a process that educates, enlightens, implemented by wisdom through his good thinking, through his beneficial way of being, to help us increase our understanding, increase our compassion, which over time eliminates, destroys our wrongful preferences. In this way, the law of consequences eventually delivers the good and satisfaction to everyone for both our good and our bad choices. A brief reminder, in the Gathas, the process of generating the law of consequences, that we reap what we sow, is reserved for the divine alone. Our good thinking is not so perfected as to be an effective instrument for delivering the law of consequences, so as to bring about enlightenment rather than repeated cycles of abuse or a thirst for revenge on the part of the recipient. In the Gathas, the human soul is judged by wisdom and by the soul itself, not by its fellow human beings, nor by any human religious authority. On the other hand, let us remember that this evolutionary process is a spiritual process, not a social process. We humans live in many different social units. If each person were free to translate his wrongful preferences into words and actions that harm others without restraint, without consequences, we would have anarchy, chaos. No person's life or property would be safe. So the rule of law, a system of just laws applicable to all without prejudice or favor, that prevents people from continuing to harm others, is necessary for the protection of individuals and our societies. This is in accord with Zarathustra's teaching that we should actively oppose what is wrong, harmful. Let us now consider unearned experiences. Not all the hardships and difficulties we experience are the consequences of our own past wrongful conduct. The wrongful choices of others often impact the innocent. So too do many factors beyond our control. Illness, the death of loved ones, poverty, hardship, earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, to give a few examples. But if, as Zarathustra teaches, life is an evolution to enlightenment, to wisdom, and acquiring wisdom is experience-based, then it stands to reason that we would have to experience a huge variety of experiences, earned and unearned, to enlarge our understanding. So now, when I experience difficulties or crises, instead of getting angry at the unfairness or the senselessness of the situation, I ask for help. I ask for understanding, which is good thinking. This I learned from Yasna 29, a mini drama which includes an allegory with which so many of us are uncomfortable. The soul of the cow. Zarathustra lived in a society that raised horses and cattle, and the cow was a hugely beneficial part of their lives, filling a great many of their needs, enabling them to survive in a time period when there were no grocery stores. Zarathustra had to pick a symbol or allegory that was relevant to the people of his time. In my view, the soul of the cow is an allegory for the universal soul of the beneficial way of being, all that is beneficial, good, in mortal existence. The cast of characters in Yasna 29 includes wisdom and 3 of its divine qualities, which are shown here as entities: truth, good thinking, and a beneficial way of being. Why does Zarathustra show these 3 qualities as entities? I think he does so to acknowledge and then reconcile in dramatic form the apparent conflict that an order of existence which is supposed to be wholly good includes so much suffering. He starts this song with a cry of suffering by the allegorical cow and a plea to the divine and its 3 qualities for help. Oops, sorry. There we go. The cruelty of fury and violence, of bondage and might, holds me in captivity. I have no other pastor than you. Therefore appear to me with good pasturage. Wisdom's beneficial way of being is troubled by such suffering and asks truth if this is the true, correct way for things to be. They replied through truth, there is no help free of enmity for the cow. At this point, wisdom, faced with an apparent impasse between the beneficial way of being's objection to suffering and truth's reply, sets the stage for this solution, giving reassurance that there is a beneficial design at work. But what is so interesting is, to whom does wisdom turn for the solution? He turns to good thinking. He says, who has been found by thee, good thinking, who might give these things to mortals? These things refers to wisdom's teachings, the path of truth, through which suffering is eliminated. And good thinking informs wisdom that it has found Zarathustra, a person who thinks. The genesis of wisdom's solution for the suffering that exists in existence, is good thinking, an understanding of what is true, good, right, which enables us to produce the beneficial thoughts, words, and actions which embody truth and establish its good rule, thereby helping to eliminate the many wrongs that cause suffering: lies, deceit, cruelty, corruption, predatory violence, etc. Yasna 29 teaches us that it is not suffering alone that is contrary to the true, correct, good order of existence. Such suffering enlarges our understanding, helps us to change our wrongful preferences, and enables spiritual growth. What is contrary to the true, good order of existence is suffering without help, without nurture, which brings us to the third kind of experiences necessary for bringing about the certain good end, which is mutual loving help, reaping what we sow. And unearned difficulties alone are not enough to change minds, change preferences. All too often, when a person is on the receiving end of injustice and other wrongful conduct, it does indeed generate hatred, anger, violence, a desire for revenge. And those exposed to abusive behavior sometimes do indeed identify with and repeat in their own lives the abusive patterns to which they have been subjected. Clearly, something more is needed to change our preferences and break the cycles of revenge, hatred, abuse, despair. That something more is the other good qualities that are a part of the true, correct, wholly good order of existence, Asha Vahishta. These qualities generate the mutual loving help we need to make it through the refiner's fire. None of us can make it on our own. To make it, each of us must both give and receive help with a generosity that does not look for an exact exchange or any exchange at all. Yasna 29 teaches us that whether we are going through small difficulties or an overwhelming dark night of the soul, there will always be help at hand. It may not take the form we expect or want, but it will be there. And in the long run, such help will be better than anything we could have asked for. So where does all this help come from? Many sources, one of which is the divine. Referring to his own suffering, Zarathustra says, take notice of it, Lord, offering the support which a friend should grant to a friend. Him, the one who offers solicitude to us, the glories of him who offers solicitude. Solicitude means a loving care, concern. And we are told that he is the first to help, protect, when we experience the difficulties of the refiner's fire, earned and unearned. He shall be here for the protection of these mortals, just as he shall be the first to do so during the repayments with molten iron. And as we have seen in a past session, wisdom helps, supports, protects with truth and its comprehension, good thinking. The loving angels that come to help us are his thoughts, his understanding, the understanding he helps us to attain. Other angels come as well to help, friends, neighbors, strangers, all part-time angels. Each of us, all the living, are part of this fellowship of part-time angels, helping in a huge variety of ways in the reality of our day-to-day lives, from something as small as a joke to cheer someone up, to more significant ways of helping. The compassionate, generous, loving, thoughtful, intelligent help we give each other is as important, as indispensable as the law of consequences and unearned calamities in changing our wrongful preferences and breaking repeated cycles of revenge and abuse. We grow by both giving and receiving help. And in the process, we help to change existence. We make things more good, more beneficial for ourselves, for each other, for other life forms, for the environment. We help to heal existence. So once again, we see that we are wisdom's partners in bringing about the beneficial thoughts, words, and actions that heal existence. As Zarathustra says, the loving man, beneficial through truth, watching over the heritage for all, is a world healer, an existence healer, and thy ally, wisdom. In the last session, one of us, I think it was Mark, asked, what is the third factor that holds everything together? I think it is mutual loving help between the divine and man and all the living that holds everything together. But without the freedom to choose and experience the consequences of our choices, our spiritual growth would have no beginning. It is the freedom to choose that starts the process of bringing about the inevitable good end, thus reconciling the paradox with which we started this session. I would like to leave you with a question. I always do this, don't I? Place this question on the back burner of your mind and let your mind play over it. If, as Zarathustra teaches, we are capable of attaining all 7 qualities of the divine completely through an evolutionary process that requires making choices, how did wisdom acquire these 7 qualities? Did wisdom choose 2? Is wisdom a part of this evolutionary process? We will consider this in the next session. And with that, I will take your questions. Oops, no questions. Do any of you have any questions verbally? If so, please let us have them.
Hi, can you hear me?
I think you will have to unmute, right? Manaz, can you unmute, please?
You can all unmute yourself. I mean,
Oh,
it's up
okay.
to everybody.
So
Yeah.
anyone wanting to ask a question, please unmute first and then ask your question.
Can you hear me now?
I can, Dolet.
I think it's with my computer. Thank you so much for your time and this amazing, amazing, thought-provoking presentation. So I guess I'm with the whole idea of molten fire. The way I guess what I'm wondering what your thoughts are, that it's the whole idea of Khashatra also being
Of what?
The symbol of Khashatra being metal.
Yes.
So, and to me, when you were describing this, and when I first read this in the Gathas, what came for me was it's literally the way metal takes shape, the same way our spirit takes shape through the pain and difficulty. So I just wanted to, and then the whole idea of the molten fire, metal being on the heart. It also connects to the Almighty. So to me, all of this really has the Ameshasa Pantons also very much weaved in.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting idea. I never thought of that, which is part of the joy of this little group. You guys always throw out such good ideas. In the later texts, there was a rigid one-by-one link between each Amesha Spenta and an aspect of the material world. And Vahukshatra, good rule, was linked with metal. And there were all kinds of speculations that maybe that's the metal of the sword because the king has power. And others speculated that, well, there's a mythical test for truth that supposedly if you pour molten metal over someone and they don't burn, then they're telling the truth, which is really quite ridiculous. It's sort of like in the Middle Ages, to decide if a woman was a witch, they made her walk over hot coals, and if her feet didn't get burned, then she wasn't a witch. Well, holy Hannah, you know, who could possibly walk over hot coals and not get burned, with some rare exceptions, which I won't go into right now. But I think what you said adds a dimension to what I saw in the see in the Gathas, and that is you take the ore, which supposedly is full of impurities, impurities being non-metal material. You make it molten through fire, and that supposedly burns out the impurities, and then you have, quote, pure metal. Well, today we know that even when metal goes, metallurgy, you know, when metal goes through a process like that, you don't have, quote, pure metal, but it is metal that can be used for a number of useful things. And so, you know, you have to put yourself in the mindset of the people of that time period. They thought it was pure metal. Later, they added different chemicals to the metal to get different kinds of alloys, which made metal stronger, or this, that, and the other, more shapeable, more malleable, things like that. But in very ancient times, in Zarathustra's time, that was the way they purified metal or obtained metal. But shaping it, that's interesting. I think that's very interesting. And I thank you for that comment.
Can I just say one more thing, but I don't want to take too much time if somebody else.
No, take all the time you want.
Because, you know, by profession, I'm a therapist. And so when I read this, I am the heat on the chest when we have panic attacks, when we have, you know, high anxiety. And the key element into healing, in my experience, is when you can withstand the heat that is happening and the transformation life is bringing you. So it's not to zap it and get rid of it, but to really allow it to shape you. So when I read this verse, actually connected my mind to literally the heat that gets generated in our modern life. You know, that's the way we look at it. That's the way that came to my mind. So just wanted to.
Well, that is really interesting, because even in therapy, the whole idea of therapy is a type of mutual loving help, isn't it?
Yes.
You help a person deal with either their disabilities or their anxieties or whatever. So when you say these things as a generality, mutual loving help, it really doesn't convey the 1,001 different ways in which it applies in our lives. So that's a really good insight. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, this, what I'm asking you may not be particularly to this particular talk, but in general, I've always been intrigued with the concept of truth. How does one know what is real truth? I mean, your truth maybe not be my truth or somebody else's truth. Is it just what you feel that is the truth? Or what is truth?
That's a really good question, Dolly. And Zarathustra has a very neat answer. He says we have to search for it. In other words,
Yeah, but search for it in your heart.
You search for it any way you can. Scientific truth, social truth, truth, for example, social justice is a type of truth. Factual truth, abstract truths, philosophical truths, spiritual truths. You search for it. And will you know it immediately in this one lifetime? Probably not. If you look at past generations, take the example of social justice. 100 years ago, people, just let's take the United States for now, because the world is so large and we have so many different cultures. People in the United States were committed to social justice. Yet 100 years ago, they accepted as okay an awful lot of things that we today would not think of as just. So how did we get from there to here? We grew, we evolved, you know, as a society, as individuals. And Zarathustra's answer is life is an ongoing search for truth. And because of that, the truths of one generation or one culture or one whatever may differ from others. But as we continue to grow and evolve and search for truth, our understanding increases until eventually the truth and our understanding of it will be the same. So in his thought, I don't think truth is subjective. I think it is objective. It's just our understanding of truth that is subjective. But as we search for truth and as life's experiences enlarge our understanding, we grow closer and closer to the ultimate good end, which is truth personified.
But to take your analogy a bit further, so if you can evolve from what was happened 100 years ago and what we now think is different, should we, as people do, go back and correct what was done? Is it behoves this generation to correct what was done the last generation and overturn the statues or overturn all sorts of things because these people did wrong? Is that what is truth?
Well, I can give you my opinion. The people who lived 100 years ago, obviously, are not alive today. We cannot make reparation to them because they don't exist anymore in that life form. What we can do is correct what remains of our wrongful attitudes. For example, I'll just give you, I don't normally like to inject politics into this, so please don't think of it as politics, think of it as an idea. We need to, in my way of thinking, we need to correct the damage of the past and the wrongdoings of the past by ensuring that they do not exist in the present. So we should give opportunities, we should give fairness, we should give friendship, all the things that were denied to certain people in the past, we should give to them now. But violence doesn't solve anything. Violence is counterproductive, whether, no matter who engages in it, if you have read the Gathas, you know that violence is one of the opposites of the true, correct order of existence, which Zarathustra calls Asha, and we today, for a shorthand, call truth. And will our efforts be perfect? Probably not, but we should keep at it. We should keep at it sincerely, invest in the kind of corrective measures that make up for present injustice that may or may not have its roots in the past. The present is what we have. We have to shape the present, and we have to shape it in a good way, a way that is just, but more than just, a way that is generous, a way that is friendly, a way that is kind, a way that is loving, a way that is good, deep down intrinsically good. That's how I see it.
Thank you.
Manik says, so it needs for us to be humble. Some truths may be valid in different times and places and societies. Well, I don't know about valid. Some truths, people in different times and places and societies may think that what they're doing is truth, and we may think that what they're doing is not truth. Each side is entitled to their own opinions. And according to Zarathustra, we all have to search for truth. I don't think in the Gathas there are different kinds of truth. Well, there is material truth, factual truth, and there is abstract truth, spiritual and other abstract, spiritual, philosophical, whatever, truths. But other than those differences, I don't think truth is subjective in the Gathas. Any other questions? From Naveed. Hi, Dina. Thanks for another amazing and thought-provoking discussion. Naveed, you're going to give me a fat head. How does Zarathustra discuss the law of consequences versus evil in the form of disease and other senseless acts? Is that part of the perfecting matrix, or does it serve some other purpose? Well, he doesn't specifically discuss this. I can tell you my ideas. I think everything that we consider to be harmful is something that is part of our perfecting process. Now, I suppose a bacteria or bacterium would have a different view. It might not like being killed by antibiotics, but that is beyond my wisdom to talk about. Maybe that's the bacterium's perfecting process. I don't know. There's an interesting Younger Avestan text. And the concept in Avestan of Verithragna means victory over evil. In other words, it's, overcoming wrongdoing so that good will prevail. And there is a text in which, in those days, they were highly storytelling sort of, they told things in a storytelling way. And there is a text in which what Darmstaedter calls the genius of various animals and birds are all a part of this perfecting process, which indicates to me that the perfecting process is not reserved for human beings alone, that all of existence in ways that may not be apparent to us are a part of this evolutionary process. In the Gathas, but that's from the later texts, but I think it is consistent with the Gathas. It's consistent with what I see in the Gathas, which may or may not be correct. Almighty, thank you, Dina. We have another talk soon, so I will sign off. That's okay, Almighty, off you go. Sohaila, thank you kindly, dear Dina, for conveying the wisdom of Zarathustra's Gathas so nicely. Thank you, Sohaila. I appreciate your kindness. Thank you. Well, if there are no more questions, Manaz, I think we can close the session. What do you think?
That was wonderful, Dina. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. It is so peaceful when you talk. My goodness, I just go into, I don't know, it's just so peaceful.
Manaz,
thank you so much.
I don't put you to sleep.
Really, I mean, it's a meditation. When you talk, it's just I go into wonderful place. Thank you. I think we still have 6. I mean, you answered all the questions. Yes. So if nobody has any more questions, we can end this, and we're gonna see you next month.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Same time, same place.
Same time, same place.
Thank you.